The views, information, or opinions expressed in this broadcast are solely those of the individuals involved and do not represent those of any other persons or entities. Furthermore, some of the activities discussed might be dangerous or illegal. Attempt them at your own risk. Hello everyone, and welcome to another edition of The Peculiar World here on the Paranormal UK radio network. I'm your host, Jeff Davis. Everyone loves, or seems to love, stories of buried treasure, especially when it's buried by pirates, which sort of explains the public fascination with them and the resulting talk like a pirate day at some people's works. Arr! A close second to that is a treasure recovered from a sunken ship, like the Brother Jonathan. Let me read some details about the Brother Jonathan from an article I wrote in my book, Portland's Rose City Ghosts, and some more details I picked up from a Wikipedia article, because if it's in Wikipedia, it must be true. The Brother Jonathan was built in 1851 at a time when ships used steam power, but builders included masts for sails just in case. She was 220 foot long and 36 foot wide with two masts, but her main propulsion came from two 33-foot diameter side-mounted paddle wheels. The Brother Jonathan carried passengers in two 70-foot-long salons decorated with gold leaf and enamel, as well as passenger cabins. On July 27, 1865, the Brother Jonathan left San Francisco headed for Portland, Oregon, with 244 passengers. According to some, she was overloaded with cargo and in need of repairs to damage caused a few days earlier, or weeks earlier, in Portland itself. In addition to manufactured goods and mining supplies, Brother Jonathan carried the pay for the U.S. Army garrisons in the Pacific Northwest, as well as gold coins to pay various Native Americans compensation as part of the government treaties. There were also supposed to be gold from Wells Fargo as well. After dropping off cargo in Crescent City, California, she continued north and headed into a storm. The captain eventually ordered the ship to return to Crescent City. Unfortunately, a wave carried her onto a granite monolith jutting up from the seafloor 250 feet below. Of the three ship's boats that they tried launching, only one made it away safely, saving 18 of 244 passengers and crew. Because of the depth of the shipwreck, at the time, no one could recover any of the gold from Brother Jonathan. However, fate seemed to take a hand. In the 1930s, a fisherman found 22 pounds of gold bars, bearing a mint mark of 1865. He died before telling anyone where he recovered the gold. Later, coin experts questioned whether this gold was from the Brother Jonathan or another source. Despite the fact that Brother Jonathan sank just 8 miles from Crescent City, the storms, rocky passageways, underwater currents, and underwater darkness prevented her from being found until 1993, when men involved with Deep Sea Research, or DSR, decided that the ship had floated underwater to hit the bottom 2 miles from the rock. Led by Donald Knight and under risky conditions, on October 1st, 1993, a mini-sub discovered Brother Jonathan in the predicted location at a depth of 275 feet underwater. In 1996, a mini-sub passed a glint on the bottom, raising curiosity. On August 30th, 1996, divers found 875 1860s coins in near-mint condition. Eventually, the salvagers recovered 1,207 gold coins. While recovery efforts were being conducted, lawsuits flew around among the salvagers, the state of California, and coin experts. California took the legal position that it owned the rights to the wreck and everything located close to its shores. Finally, in 1998, the U.S. Supreme Court unanimously decided against California and ruled for the salvagers. However, California threatened an appeal, and in a settlement, the state received 20% of the recovered gold. On May 29, 1999, the salvagers held their first legal sale at the Los Angeles Airport Marriott Hotel. They sold 1,006 of the coins, and that brought them $5.3 million. Later, the finders of the coins once again appealed the Supreme Court's decision and were granted the rest of California's gold coins. You can go online and buy some of these coins from dealers. To see some of the other artifacts, the Del Norte County Historical Society has been refurbishing and maintaining the artifacts, as well as having an exhibit on the Brother Jonathan's demise. In a rare twist of fate, the ship's wheel was recovered a few days after the shipwreck in 1865, with the body of one of the sailors lashed to it. Currently, the ship's wheel is on display at Dan and Louie's Oyster Bar in Portland, Oregon. Some people believe that the wheel retains some psychic impressions of the wreck and the death of the sailor. Thinking about it, the story of the Brother Jonathan follows a predictable pattern. The ship is lost with all or most of its passengers. They can't recover the gold or the ship. And decades go by and the exact location of the ship is lost, but somebody finds bits and pieces, and that kind of keeps the hunt going. There may even be a treasure map. And finally, despite many dangers, someone finds it and recovers the treasure, only to have the government come in and try to take it away. But what about a treasure that was deliberately hidden by someone who left clues, someone who wants someone else, another person, eventually to find it and keep it as a gift? That someone was a man named Forrest Fenn, and his treasure is still out there. Or is it? I have someone who might be able to help any and all of us find the treasure. Listeners to the Paranormal UK radio network, all of you, if you've been listening for any length of time, have been treated to conspiracy theories, tales of the evil government or evil corporations trying to dominate our lives and things like that. This is a little bit different, describing the Forrest Fenn Treasure, and I hope you're interested in it, and perhaps you may become captivated by the idea as well. And that's what this gentleman who is going to be talking to us next is going to talk about, is the good things that can come from a good and safe treasure hunt. So Dale, if you would please introduce yourself, we can begin.
Hi, I'm Dale Neitzel. I run the Thrill of the Chase blog, daleneitzel.com.
And Dale has been researching and kind of putting together this whole guidelines and searching himself for the Forrest Fenn Treasure. Dale, could you tell me a little bit about Forrest Fenn himself?
Oh, absolutely. Forrest Fenn is a gentleman born in 1930. His family spent their summers out at West Yellowstone on the edges of Yellowstone National Park. They had some cabins out in West Yellowstone, and Forrest and his dad were both fishing guides out there in the 1940s and 50s. Forrest started guiding when he was 14 years old. He wasn't even old enough to drive his customers around. He had to have them drive. But he was a pretty successful fisherman and fisher guide out there. In 1950, he joined the military, and he got out in 1970 after a pretty tough tour in Vietnam. He was an F-100 fighter pilot and got shot down out of the sky twice, survived, was rescued once, and once he made it back to the landing field before his plane fell apart.
He had over 300 missions, didn't he?
Yeah, I don't know the exact number, but he did have a heck of a lot of missions out there and won several awards for his action. He came back, moved to Santa Fe, New Mexico, opened up a gallery there. His gallery was quite celebrated. He was known as a collector of North American, Western and Indian art and artifact. He collected, went to shows, and he was probably one of the most successful galleries in Santa Fe, and that's saying something. There's a lot of successful galleries in Santa Fe. He accumulated a lot of wealth on his way. He became a multi-millionaire. In 1988, he came down with cancer. The doctors gave him a slim chance of surviving over 6 months, so he decided that he didn't want to die in a hospital with tubes up his nose. So he decided to take some of what he had, some of his most valuable objects, and put them in a chest. He bought a bronze chest, paid $25,000 just for the chest. It's itself an ancient artifact. And he was going to fill the chest with his special items, and he was going to take his chest out and take about 50 sleeping pills when he felt it was close. And his plan was to go to a special place that he has known about for a long time. We don't know where that place is. And he wrote a poem that he was going to leave. The poem would give folks directions on how to find Forrest and the chest. The last few lines of the poem said something like, "Take the chest, but leave my bones alone." So anybody who followed the poem and found Forrest and the chest was welcome to the chest. But then something happened. Forrest didn't die. The cancer went away. And so Forrest was left with this chest. He decided to go ahead and hide it anyway. He rewrote the poem a little bit so it had nothing to do with his bones. He says that he hid the chest in the same place where he was going to end his life on his own. But the chest is there by itself now. And he has released the poem. He wrote a book and put the poem in the book, but the poem is available lots of places online, and folks can read it. Forrest says you need only the poem to solve the riddle of where the chest is at. The first person to find it gets to have it. That's the story.
Wow. How long is the poem? Is 50 lines?
Oh, it's not 50. I can't remember how many. I think there's 6 stanzas, 4 lines each, so 24 lines.
Okay. After we get done, for my audience, I may try and dig it out and read it out loud and see if anybody else is interested in looking for the Forrest Fenn Treasure.
And online, you can also hear Forrest read it out loud. When you start, sometimes he uses words that oftentimes people haven't heard before, and folks like to hear him read it to hear how he uses those words with his voice.
Oh, okay. Is there a link to that on your site?
There is, but it's not easily found because he's read it a couple of different times. We have lots of interviews with Forrest on my site, interviews that took place with various journalists and news folks, and he's read it more than once. But those many, I mean, probably there's 100 or more news stories, interviews on the website itself. And in more than one of them, you can hear Forrest actually read the poem.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's interesting that, how do I put this? I've not heard of Forrest Fenn until about 2 months ago, even though he buried the chest it was over a decade ago, wasn't it?
No, not quite. It was in 2010.
Okay. And, well, I feel a little bit better about being ignorant of that, because usually things like Forrest Fenn's treasure chest, I would have immediately picked up on. I think the treasure hunter community is probably zeroed in on this, and to some people who are just a little bit outside, it is still an unknown. Oh,
yeah. The blog is very popular all around the world, and we get about, right now, we're getting about, because it's mid-winter and a lot of people are sloughing off, we'll get about 650 new hits every hour on the blog. But in the summertime, when folks are actively looking for the treasure chest, we'll get over 1,700 active hits, new unique visitors every hour on average.
My website should get so many hits.
Yeah, I wish I was selling something on the blog.
Now, have you met Forrest?
Yes, I've met Forrest. I've known him for many years, right from the beginning of the chase. I knew about him long before he started the chase, the hunt for his treasure chest, because I was a treasure hunter of sorts, and his nephew Creighton Fenn and I hung out together for years in various places around the world looking for sunken ships full of gold.
Were you in on the getting the gold from the brother Jonathan off of the Oregon, California coast?
No, but I sure wish I had been.
Yeah, that's quite a saga, and I sprinkle these out hopefully so that my listening audience will say, well, maybe I should look up the brother Jonathan. Of these buried wrecks, which one have caught your interest?
I think probably the most fantastic one was looking for. We went for a lot of historical objects that weren't necessarily loaded with gold, but this particular one did have gold on it. It was a submarine, a Japanese submarine lost in World War II called the I-52. It left Singapore and was on its way to Germany full of gold to pay off some of the Japanese war debt to the Germans. And by that time, the U.S. had broken the Japanese naval code. So they knew about the existence of the ship, they knew what it was being loaded with, and they knew it was on its way to Germany, and they wanted to stop it from getting there so that hopefully it would help end the war earlier than it would otherwise if Germany had more resources. So the Americans set about to sink that submarine, and in fact that's what they did. Some 50 years later, we went after it to try and see if we could find, and we did.
That's amazing. My background is in archaeology, and so I've always felt, you know what, the gold, the silver, that's kind of cool, but just the entire snapshot in time that you probably found and what was left on that submarine must have been amazing.
Basically, the submarine is still intact, but the problem with it is that it's more than 5 miles down. It's deeper than the Titanic, and so recovering objects from it, including the gold, has never been successful. The owner of that wreck is a fellow by the name of Paul Tidwell, and he's still working on trying to come up with a plan to salvage that gold. But so far, nobody has gotten at it.
5 miles down, I can see why. It's interesting. Some of these treasures, intrinsically worthwhile, worth lots of money, are still preserved and protected. When I was in my late teens, early 20s, I dated this one gal, and her father, before Pearl Harbor, had served on USS Arizona, and he was telling me that the officers' mess silver was donated to the ship by the state of Arizona, which was big silver mining. And I'm not sure how many dozens, if not over 100 officers were stationed on the Arizona, but when she went down, the entire sterling silver service went down with her.
Yeah, and no one's going to be diving on the Arizona to collect any artifacts, that's for sure. It's considered a national cemetery.
Yeah, I hope no one does.
We spent about 5 years in Uruguay hunting for shipwrecks from the 15th to the present, from the 15th century to the present, and we would find ships down there that were just absolutely wonderfully full of beautiful artifacts. Still intact, because at that particular place in Uruguay there was a great deal of fresh water, the outflow of the Rio Plata. The fresh water preserves wood and artifacts better than salt water. Salt water is more acidic and will eat things away, but with that influence of fresh water, many more artifacts were still intact. It was a wonderful place to dive and look at artifacts.
Oh, it sounds like it. I have a friend who's from the island of Truk in the Pacific, and that was one of those big major island battles of World War II. He told me that around the island they would dive as kids, and they would come down on the wrecks of airplanes and landing craft and other items from the war. Oh
God, yeah. We spent a great deal of time up in Labrador near the end of World War II. That particular route was a popular route to transport planes back and forth between the United States and England to get combat aircraft into Europe. And this particular plane, this was shortly after the war. This particular plane went down and it got lost in a storm up there and couldn't find the base. And they ended up landing on frozen lake, and of course they got rescued. The crew all got out intact. They landed with wheels up and landed on their belly, messed up some of the engines, but the plane itself was intact. So 50 years later, that plane is worth quite a bit of money. This was a B-17 aircraft that, for all practical purposes, is intact. And folks who fly B-17s still today, there's a few of them still flying. The parts for them are practically impossible to find. So the folks who do have them are always looking for those parts. So the parts alone could be worth millions of dollars. So get back looking for that plane with a fellow, and found it eventually in like 15 feet of water. And so that was a terrific find. And he decided to put that plane back together and fly it again. As far as I know, it's very close to being flown again.
Oh, I'll have to try and look him up for one of my upcoming podcasts. Things like that are always interesting, and I hate to use the word peculiar because it's not. It's just exciting to me, too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've always been wrapped up in history. History is interesting to me, and it's much more interesting when you're involved in it, and it's really what those going after, trying to re-find parts of history that were lost. It really puts you back in time. It really does allow you to get involved in history, and it really brings it to life for me. I really find that enjoyable.
Yeah, and if you keep on doing it long enough, pretty soon you get put into books and you become part of history.
Yeah. Eventually we all become dust of history.
Yeah, that's so true. I think it's a great thing when you contribute, enlarging the knowledge base of humanity, or preserving that from the past, which had disappeared. It's interesting, B-17, right?
Right.
B-17s. How many B-17s were made by the United States in the factories?
10,000.
Yeah, and
10,000 were made by the Boeing company, and fewer than 14 of them, less than one squadron of them, exist today. Very few of those are flyable. Most of them are on static displays in museums.
Yeah, isn't it amazing how quickly that went away? I mean, these things were designed to be shot full of holes and still keep on flying, but that was part of what America did and has done after each war. They just get rid of the old equipment and almost forget it exists. And within a generation, the children of these soldiers look around and say, where's our heritage?
When we found that plane, we went back and talked with the pilot and co-pilot who were still alive at the time. They were full of smiles, and they commented, I thought it was pretty fun, they commented that they had no idea when they crashed that plane that they were storing it. They thought they were crashing it, but it turned out they were storing it for 55 years.
Yeah, very similar to that. I'm the head of a military history preservation and education charity, and 2018, 2019 is the 100th anniversary of the end of World War I. And our big interpretive piece is a World War I ambulance, but there are probably only a dozen of the original ambulances still in existence, because after the war they sold them as surplus or just left them behind, and the locals got a hold of them and turned these ambulances into farm transport vehicles and things like that. So we started from scratch and bought a Model T, and then the guys took it all the way down to the frame and sanded and painted. They even had to recreate the drawings, the plans for it, because those didn't survive either.
I'll be darned. That's dedication.
It is, and my hat is off to the guys, and they're very smart. Most of them are former sergeants, NCOs, and I'm a former officer, and they wouldn't let me touch any of the tools. About the only thing they let me do is they let me paint primer on the wooden parts, because they could.
Must have been something they didn't want to do.
Yeah, that was that too. But they also kind of said, we're going to paint the real color over the primer, so you can't mess it up.
Oh, okay. That's funny.
Yeah, they're good guys. We continue doing stuff down here in the Vancouver area, and your major home now is in Washington State as well, isn't it?
Yeah, I live on Lummi Island, but I work in Bellingham, Washington. So I get to commute on a ferry every day.
Does your civilian job, is it kind of complementary to your historic quests?
Not particularly. I run a small television station up in Bellingham, a small community TV station. It's the only job I've really ever had. The treasure hunting material, that's always been an aside, and it worked out because I was a freelance producer for CNN for years, and so I could take weeks off if I wanted to. With a schedule like that, you can dedicate weeks to go look for an airplane, or weeks to go look for a sunken vessel, or even months. And so I could do that. And so it was good. I had a job I could walk away from for months. Not too many people can do that. And so I did that for years. I was a a film cameraman and a producer and a director, and I worked at television stations, and then eventually started my own company and started working for folks like CNN and the Discovery Channel, creating projects for them. But it was always a job I could simply take a break from at any time. So when something cool came up, somebody would call me up and say, "Hey, do you want to go to South America for 6 months?" I would say, "Absolutely."
When somebody said to me, "So, Jeff, do you want to go to Southwest Asia for 6 months?" I myself couldn't even say no, because it happened to be Uncle Sam. Your travel sounds a lot more interesting, but probably some of those places not much safer than, say, Afghanistan.
Well, it sounds like I'm about your age. I went into the military after high school in 1966, and I got out in 1970. So I was involved in that same era that you're talking about, and that's where I started my work as a motion picture cameraman. The Marine Corps took one look at me and said, "We're probably all safer if we don't put him on the front lines. Let's give him a camera. He looks like he might be able to handle that." And so they did. And so in I've been shooting film since 1966, basically.
Wow, it's safer to point a camera at other people than it is a gun.
Yeah, in some places at any rate.
Yeah, I am some years younger than you.
Unless they have guns and
and they don't want their pictures taken.
Yeah.
I'm some years younger than you. I come from a service family, so you're kind of in between mine and my father's ages. But,
okay.
You've lived an exciting life, by the sound of it.
Oh, I don't think it's been very exciting, but it's been very rewarding, and it's been an adventure, I think, and I certainly like that part. There's always been somebody, but it's always been not because I was an original thinker, not like Forrest Fenn. I think Forrest Fenn is a very original thinker. He decided to start this treasure hunt of his at a time when the economy was really, really bad. 2010, we were recovering from the recession, and he was out there trying to give people some incentive and possibly give some people an opportunity to get their hands on some money. And so this was his way of providing adventure for people, and providing a game for people, and providing fun for people at a time when a lot of folks were pretty hard up, couldn't make ends meet.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, the expression "living the dream" kind of comes to mind when you put it that way.
Yeah, but I was never one of those original thinkers. See, if I had an extra $3 million to go hide somewhere, I'm not sure I'd be able to make myself do it. I'd always be worried about the future. But Forrest had plenty of money. It's like a detective story, People say, "Well, how do you know Forrest did this? Maybe he's lying about this, and maybe it didn't. Maybe he never really did it." And since nobody has found it yet in 8 years, you get more and more and more naysayers out there. But the truth is, you look at it like a detective. He had the means. $3 million to him he had plenty of money. He was approaching the end of his life. I mean, he's 89 now, so he was 79 or 80 when he did this. He didn't know how much longer he was going to be around. He had already fought off cancer once. You never know when that stuff's going to come back. And Forrest has always been a guy who's liked to have fun in his life. He's always been interested in the American West, and he hid this thing in the American West. We know that he hid it in the mountains north of Santa Fe. It could be in northern New Mexico, it could be in Colorado, it could be in Montana, or it could be in Wyoming, but we know it's in the mountains. We know it's between 5,000 and 10,200 feet in elevation, and he won't say whether it's buried or not. He'll only say he hid it. We know some other things about it, too, which narrow down where in the mountains it could be. And we know a lot of things about Forrest's life, which could indicate where this special place actually is. So if you study the clues, you can narrow down this place. It hasn't helped us find it yet, but I think it will be found. It will be unraveled. Somebody will figure it out. Why not you? Or better yet, why not me?
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting now that, again, you said it in the context of the year 2010. I remember how bad the economy was, and as I'm looking at television shows and reruns from the History Channel, there are a lot of these treasure hunter kind of TV shows out, gold miners. And when I worked for the Forest Service during times of economic downturn, the number of people filing gold mining claims went way, way up. I remember that. For people who don't have much hope, you might as well just go out and try your luck.
Yeah, and people aren't hiring, You're trying to think of ways to make money. Well, you could throw everything out in front of your house and have a big garage sale. You can do that once. You can deliver newspapers. You can do that for a while, but that's hard to feed your family doing that. Yeah. Many newspapers left. So, you can start selling things on eBay. There are tried and true ways, but none of them are ways that you're going to be able to actually, A, have a great deal of fun, have an adventure, and make money at the same time. So treasure hunting is a way where you could potentially make quite a bit of money, and B, have a great adventure. Unfortunately, the chances of you being successful are probably not as good as, the 15 or 20 cents an hour you're going to make selling newspapers. But, it's fun. It's more fun and enjoyable than selling things on eBay to most people.
Yeah, I agree. And it is something that mixes in with the whole romantic notion, and also, just like your treasure hunting, it's not all about the intrinsic value, the dollar value of something. It's joining with becoming part of history.
Oh, yeah. We never made a cent on any of the material we went after. We went after the B-17. Well, let me take that back. We certainly made a living. We were paid to do these things. But when we found the submarine that was full of gold, we didn't get a part of that gold, even when we won't get a part of it. When they do recover that gold, we were hired hands. We were paid a daily wage, basically, to come out and use our skills, our recovery skills and our salvage skills to find that vessel. And we did. And when we found it, we left. The B-17 was the same way. We were paid by somebody who raised a great deal of money to hire us and do some other things to find and then recover that aircraft. And they hired us to find it. We found it. When it was found, our job was done. But it's great fun to be involved in those things. You're working with a small group of tight-knit folks. You're thrown into an environment that you know nothing about. It's an adventure, and it's an adventure with people who you get along with, and people who you don't know who you learn to get along with. For instance, on the B-17 trip, there were less than a dozen of us involved in that trip, and we were there for month and a half, maybe, up in Labrador. None of us had been up to Labrador before. It took us over a day to get there, flying the whole time in 3 different aircraft, because each time we had to get a smaller and smaller aircraft, and we had a whole ton of materials that had to be taken and flown in with us at the same time. But every person on that trip had a specific skill. There were navigators, there were side-scan sonar experts, there were boat experts, there was a hunter and a fishing guide. Their job was to make sure we had food to eat every day. I mean, it took 12 people to make sure that this group could go out there and look for this plane.
Sometimes when I was doing archaeology, we had these crews, and sometimes it was only seasonal hires, sometimes seasonal employees came back year after year, and you got to know each other, and it may well be that you didn't see each other for 4 or 5 years, but when you did, it was like old home week.
Yeah, it's quite fun to get together. Absolutely. I've run into, going on specific trip, you do run into the same folks over and over again. They're working on, you meet them once and you work on a project, it's successful or not, and then you go away for sometimes 2 or 3 years. Everybody's working on different projects, and then all of a sudden you all get together because for whatever reason you all got hired to work on the same project again. And it is a lot of fun and quite enjoyable. And there's always a sense of survival about it too, because you're basically not just organizing this treasure hunt, you're also organizing your own survival for the period of time you're out there. These things happen in downtown Seattle or downtown Baltimore. Generally, you're out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean or out in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, or you're in some jungle in Madagascar, or up in Labrador, Canada, or, or down in Uruguay, you're not usually in some place where you can just run to the grocery store every day at 5 o'clock and pick up a dozen eggs for breakfast tomorrow.
Yeah, one of my archaeology professors, I did my graduate work in England, and he was one of these poor guys who, when summer hit, he ended up, fortunately, developing heat rash. So he found that it was easier in summer to get archaeology work up near the Arctic Circle. And he was telling me that they had one trip where they were out doing some survey work, and this is off of Greenland, and their boat got a hole in the dirt. It sank somehow. And so there they were on this little island that was mostly a sandbar, trying to figure out how they were going to survive until somebody thought to look for them. Yeah.
Yeah, well, so far I've managed to miss being stranded on a sandbar, but I can certainly appreciate that. There were times when I certainly felt like if this doesn't go well, if we don't make it through this, nobody's going to know where the hell we're at.
Yeah, and that's part of the background that makes it so exciting too. Is real danger. Is real life. It's not some kind of fantasy where watching a TV show about treasure hunting in Indiana Jones is vastly different than being Indiana Jones.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons people like treasure hunting and looking for Forrest Fenn's treasure too. We don't know where it is, and the mountains are a vast place, and a lot of people really enjoy the adventure of looking for his treasure. I mean, it can be an adventure. It can take you to places you haven't been before. We know that it's not in a dangerous place, Forrest has said, and we know that Forrest hit it himself when he was 79 or 80 years old, so he wasn't rappelling off of a cliff or anything. It doesn't take Indiana Jones skills to find Forrest Fenn's treasure, but it does take some detective skills, and that doesn't leave out the possibility that it's in some remote, mountainous but yet beautiful place where somebody would like to be able to lay down, and this would be their last vision of Earth before the great unknown, would be this view of wherever this treasure chest is. And so you put all of that kind of thing together and you follow the clues in the poem. There are 9 clues in that poem which tell us, Forrest has said, if you follow these 9 clues precisely, lead you directly to the chest. And that's what everybody is trying to do, is figure out what the clues are in the poem and what they mean. Begin at where warm waters halt. We know that's the first clue in the poem. But what does that mean? Where do warm waters halt? And what does that place have to do with Forrest Fenn's life? Okay, so there are lots of theories. Maybe he's talking about a geyser. Maybe he's talking about a place where some people think maybe the Continental Divide. I still haven't figured out why the Continental Divide is where warm waters halt, but a lot of people believe that could be where warm waters halt. But where on the Continental Divide, or which geyser, if you believe that? So although we know that that's the first clue, we don't know what it means. We also know that Forrest has said several people have been within 200 feet of the chest, but then they walked right on by it. That gives us hope. We know that people have been close. And how does Forrest know that? He knows that because people write him all the time and tell him where they're at. They send him pictures. And he said, I know that they were within 200 feet of the chest. They don't know that. I didn't tell them that. Mm-hmm. We don't know who. I'm assuming, of course, that it must be me.
Yeah. Well, and some people have actually paid with their lives.
That's right. So far, 4 people have died out looking for Forrest's chest. But you have to remember that they made the most grievous error of all. They didn't remember that, A, Forrest said it's not in a dangerous place, and B, Forrest set this whole thing up. His intent was to get kids away from video games. It is intended to be a family adventure. So folks forget that. They go out and they jump into a raging river. That's how one person died. Another person was in a raging river in a small raft that tipped over, and he drowned. There's no reason to put yourself in harm's way while you're looking for Forrest's treasure. People shouldn't be dying looking for it. That isn't what he intended, and it isn't supposed to be a test of your skills in navigating the wilderness. This is about figuring out a puzzle and finding a lovely, wonderful, special place to Forrest Fenn.
Yeah, kind of had that feeling too before I even called you. That was my primary take was this guy's in his 80s and he's just recovering from cancer. He's really not going to be able to move too far away from his car, lugging this heavy chest of stuff. So that should kind of, you put these little circles, distances and overlap from where the road network ends to where the other possible environmental conditions that he talks about. And you just overlay all of these positive clues in process of elimination hopefully would lead you to 5 or 6 possibilities that were firm, and then you go out and visit.
Absolutely, and you're perfectly right. We know more things. We have more clues than just the poem itself. One of the things we know, because Forrest just told us, is that he parked his car somewhere. He said it was a sedan, and he made 2 trips out to the place where the treasure is, and he said he did that because of the weight. We're talking about roughly 42 pounds of material that he had to lug somewhere to hide it. He said he made 2 trips, so he split it up. He took the chest back empty, probably first, and then went back to his car and grabbed all of the other materials, 20-some pounds of materials, and treasure itself, and carried it back there, and then came back to his car again and left. And he said he did that in one afternoon. So we know he didn't walk from his car 100 miles or 50 miles or probably even 3 miles. It's not too darn far from where he parked his car.
And so there should be a road, gravel probably, if not paved. And, yep, fairly level, certain distance away because he made those 2 trips, but he had to actually make the final leg back to get to his car, too, all in an afternoon.
That's right, and he did all in one afternoon.
Boy, I'm ready to go find it right now, too.
Yeah, well, okay, let's go. I'm ready. Except now's a bad time of year to go. We stay out of the mountains in the winter, basically. It's not a good time to be out there looking for forest treasure, and he's advised people not to go in the winter. He suggested right from the very start, he said, now's a good time to do your planning. Try and figure out the poem, figure out the puzzle of the poem, come up with a solution where you think it is. Use Google Earth, use a good map, use the poem, and Forrest has also written books. I'm not sure how many books, 7 or 8, maybe more different books, but 2 of them have, or 3 of them now, have been written basically about his life. And if you take a look at those books, and you can find them in libraries, you don't necessarily have to buy them, but you can find them everywhere now. Unfortunately, the price has skyrocketed on eBay, and because, for used books, because everybody's trying to make a bunch of money off of Forrest Fenn's name. But you can find them around used, and you can find them around, or you can pool it with a friend of yours and buy them. One of his books, Too Far to Walk, beautiful hardcover book, full of pictures, and has stories about Forrest's life in it, and you can buy it brand new for $35. And the money itself doesn't go to Forrest. Some people accuse Forrest of having written these books to make money off of folks who are hunting for the treasure, and that's plainly not true. All of the money that is captured from the sale of these books goes to a cancer fund that Forrest set up. It doesn't go to him, and he sold quite a few of the books. He doesn't even organize the selling of them. He gave the rights to sell them to a small bookstore in Santa Fe, an independent bookstore. So they're the only place you can buy the first book, at least new, and they're spendy. I think it's $65 for that first book, but all of the additional money goes straight to this cancer fund. The second book is $35, and I think the third book is even less than that. But all the money, all the profits go to a cancer fund, and none of it goes back to Forrest. Forrest doesn't make a cent of this. In fact, it cost him a great deal of money to have these books published. So they've cost him. They haven't rewarded him in any way, and he's not making any money from that. He doesn't need money. That isn't what he needs in life. He's perfectly set up. He made millions, and he's still got most of it. So.
Yeah, good for him. It is interesting. When I was doing some of the background research before contacting you, of course, like everybody else in the world, I believe that if it's on the internet, it must be true. And if it's on Wikipedia, it must be really, really true. But the Wikipedia article on Forrest is interesting. It seems to be pretty straightforward. And under the reference section, it does have this whole list of books as references. And they fall into three genres, I found. One is Forrest's books, which he just described, his own books and works on this. And there's another set of books written by people about their experiences. It's like a testimonial or a memoir. If I got into trying to find Forrest's gold, and here's my personal story. As you described, it's kind of like a self-enrichment, and they're sharing it. The third genre are, I know where Forrest's treasure is, and if you buy my book, find it. That one
that one's pretty outlandish. So here's a person who didn't find the treasure, and they wrote a book about not finding it, and they want you to buy it so you cannot find it too. I can't figure that out.
Well, yeah, I'm trying not to be too critical of these people, because I think that they think they're doing a service. They are kind of elucidating the clues or making them a little bit clearer. But what it really does sound like to me is, if you really did know where the treasure is, you would have found it, and then you wouldn't have need to write this book because you'd have all the money.
Right. Yeah. It's preposterous. I think mostly those kinds of books are written by people who are just hoping to cash in.
Yeah, I don't want to sound, again, too critical, because...
I don't mind sounding critical.
It is interesting. It is a phenomenon that, I guess, to me, it's surprising that it's not bigger, that mainstream, that it's... I know you know about it, and you get hundreds of hits a day from people looking into it. I just am kind of surprised that there are not some kind of, almost like a marathon, where they gather first day of spring, May 1st or something like that they gather everybody in one spot, and they say, everybody on your marks, get set, bang, and then everybody kind of runs off. Because that sounds like that would be just...
Well, it's funny you should mention that, because every spring we do have what was, and I don't have anything to do with the organization of this, but we do have an event called Fenbury, which is usually held at a state park near Santa Fe, and we get hundreds of folks who attend the Fenbury. And these are basically people from all over the country who come out, and almost every time Forrest has been, he'll show up for a day out there. It gives, and basically what we do is we have meals together, we camp out, we spend our evenings around the campfire roasting marshmallows and telling stories about looking for Forrest's treasure. We share ideas for what the first, fourth, and 18th clue might, there's only 9. Okay, the first, fourth, and 7th clue might be. And we just have a good time, get to know one another, and put a face to some of the names that we see on the blogs about people who oftentimes get on the blog and talk about. There's a lot of discussion about what the clues are, how to solve the poem, and it's just a fun thing. So there is that Fenbury event. We also have events where people just get together in the middle of the summer. A group will get together in Colorado, or a group will get together in Montana and head out and start looking. We have families that look together. I've even had teachers contact me. One of them was from Tacoma, who have a treasure hunting class after school. And they use Forrest Fenn's poem, and the kids try to, this was a middle school, and they, after school meet, the kids do, and they try to come up with a solution for Forrest's poem, and then they send the teacher out in the summer to go follow the clues and see if he can find it. I don't know what they would do with all the money if the teacher actually found it, but anyway, so all kinds of groups. I met a preacher from Iowa, I believe, when I was out on looking one time, and he told me that his congregation sent him out there to look for the treasure to raise money for the church. I mean, people are very inventive in the reasons that they have for looking for Forrest's treasure, and there are some interesting and really clever people out there looking for Forrest treasure, but there are a lot of folks just like me who really don't know a thing about this and are just having a good time looking. It's just a way to, it's a reason to get out into some beautiful parts of the mountains and look around and explore and have a small adventure all by yourself. I've got 70 searches under my belt, and I'm not even tired of it yet. I'm having a great time looking. I enjoy it. Sometimes I'll go to a place to look, but I know I'm not going to find it in this place. But you know what? It's an excuse to go out there and walk around and have a small adventure and explore. And I do that. And it's a wonderful thing for a lot of people to get them outside, to get them out looking, to get them to explore some of this country and have a good time with it.
It sounds like it, and that definitely comes across when you talk about it and what you get out of the whole Forrest Fenn Treasure phenomenon, because it is a phenomenon.
Yeah, and I have to say, too, that, it's not surprising to me that we don't hear more about it. And the reason for that is because, first of all, it's been covered by Aver Major Network several times. Forrest appeared on the Today Show several times. They were having him on once a month to give new clues. It's been on CBS, ABC, NBC. It's been on the Discovery Channel. It's been on A Great Big Story. It's been on the BBC. It's been on Australian TV several times. It's been on Japanese TV several times. Spanish TV came out and did a story on it. It's been all over the world. And when you think about the numbers of people Forrest is in contact with, he gets hundreds of emails every day. When you think about the number of people who are interested in this treasure, it is vast. There are tens of thousands of people who've been out there looking for this treasure. Providing, these people have to stay in motels. They eat and travel. They buy gas. They stop in towns. They eat in restaurants. It's been good for the economy in many, many ways. I don't think there's too many states out there in the mountains who aren't benefiting a little bit from these tens of thousands of people who are out there looking for Forrest treasure. I think it is big. The reason we don't hear about it a great deal is because most of the people who are out there looking don't want to share. They're out there looking. They're out there looking for a treasure, and if they have an idea where they think it's at, they're not going to talk about that to too many other people.
Got to agree with you there. I remember, again, my Forest Service days with these gold mining claims that were coming up. One of the things that happened was, that I found really funny, was there's this one guy who basically filed a claim every, I think, 50 feet down this one river. That he was only active on one claim, but what he ended up doing was, which was a no-no, was he started posting signs that said, gold mining claim, trespassers will be shot.
Yeah.
And he actually walked around with a pistol, and about that point, somebody who was just hiking down that river or stream got scared, and so we had to send the law enforcement guys to talk to him about, claim jumping doesn't happen all that often anymore. So I can see keeping it secret.
Yeah, there's all kinds of people in the world. There are people who like to share, and there are people who don't like to share. There are people who like to spend time with other people, and there are people who like to avoid other people. There are people who love talking and socializing with other people, and there are people who just are misanthropes and don't want anything to do with people and just as soon be left completely alone, or worse, do something to eliminate other people from the world. And you get the best and the worst, I think, in a treasure hunt. You get some of the most wonderful people in the world and some of the worst people in the world out there looking. You can have a wonderful time or you can have a really bad time. But I guess it's the same as going to Disneyland. The same thing applies. You can have a great time, or you can end up having a pretty rotten time, spending a lot of money and just doing nothing but getting sick on all the rides.
Well, I guess to sum it up, what I hear you saying is, in the search for Forrest Fenn's treasure, you get out of it what you put into it.
Well, that's absolutely true. Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And there are lots of places out there on the internet where you can get lots of information about the hunt if you are interested more in it. You don't necessarily have to go out there and spend money to do anything, except if you live far away from the mountains, you've got to figure out a little bit of a way to spend some money to get out to the mountains. But once you're there, it's the mountains. There are places to camp. You can, as you well know, drive off off of the road on practically any Forest Service land and sleep, and nobody's going to hassle you. You could pitch a tent if you've got one. You don't have to spend a great deal of money once you're out there. You've got to have a little bit of food. You got to have water. You got to have gas for your car. But you don't have to stay in a fancy hotel. If you bring your family, I guess you do. But if you go by yourself, you don't.
Yeah. And I guess, believe it or not, we've been talking for nigh on to an hour now. And so we are going to have to cut this a little bit short. But again, for people who want to visit your site and start the research there, can you give me the address again?
Sure. It's my name, basically. It's www.daleneitzel.com. That's DALNEITZEL.com. Okay, great. Any other recommendations you have before we end this podcast? Oh, have fun. If you decide to go looking for Forrest Treasure, have fun.
Amen. I think I may start out this coming spring myself.
Oh, I'm looking forward to it. Maybe I'll run into you out there.
I hope so. I don't have time probably to read all 25 lines of the poem, so I will try and find some links for everybody to find. And Dale, I thank you, and so we're going to sign off for now.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye. Wait, don't go away. We've still got another minute or two left, and I have something more to share with you. I don't think that I could read the entire Forrest Fenn poem to you without making a mistake or probably boring you all. However, I did go online and I found the 9 clues, or what some people think are the 9 clues hidden in the poem. Number 1, begin where the warm waters halt. 2, canyon down, too far to walk. Number 3, put in below, home of brown. Number 4, no place for the meek. Number 5, end is ever drawing nigh. Number 6, no paddle up your creek. Well, I should have read it differently. No paddle up your creek. Number 7, heavy loads, water high. Number 8, blaze. Number 9, quickly down, cease. Of course, other people have a different list of clues. And even if these are correct, are they in the right order? After all, you need a starting point and an ending point. Forrest Fenn has suggested he has seen or heard all of the correct clues, but will not reveal who had them right. He also said that he has not heard them in the correct order for someone to try and follow them as directions. This may be what keeps people looking. To many people, the 9 clues that I did read out loud seem to suggest having to do with, of course, water, rivers, and when it's talking about heat, perhaps it has something to do with geysers. So some people have traveled up to Yellowstone. Other people, keeping in mind how old Forrest Fenn was and what his general health, are doing things in the mountains at high elevation in Arizona. And that is where some of these gatherings take place. So you can see when Dale talked about it's just a fun time. Don't count on actually finding the treasure, but count on having a good time trying to find it. That is, I think, his message behind this. If you decide to go looking, please let me know. And if I decide to go looking too, I will definitely have an update for you all. In addition to being able to listen to this podcast over the Paranormal UK radio network, please do visit my website, www.ghostsandcritters.com. And once there, go to What's New section, and I should have an update including some more background and links about Forrest Fenn, the Forrest Fenn Treasure, and Dale. So please visit me there. Good hunting, and have a great evening and rest of your week. Bye. Our theme music has been Dance Macabre by Camille Saint-Saëns, performed by Kevin MacLeod. www.incompetech.com. Licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 3.0. Thank you for listening to The Peculiar World here on the Paranormal UK Radio Network.